Okay, that's your cue. I don't know if you heard it. I know you probably didn't because if you're visiting, that's good though. You're enjoying yourselves. Now it's time to stop enjoying yourself. It's time to have a class. We're talking about, huh?
No more enjoyment.
That's right. Um, we're still talking about the book of Apocalypse. What does that say to you? And what does that mean? Book of Revelation. That's right. And because it's called that, what does that tell you? What should you expect to find in a book called Apocalypse?
What's going to happen in the future?
Well, okay. Anyone else?
Well, before you straightened us out, it was what was going to happen to us in the future.
What was going to happen to us in the future?
But now,
Final battle.
what the Jews.
Final battle.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Even though it says a certain thing, that doesn't mean that you should take it literal.
Okay, even though it says a certain thing, it doesn't mean you take it literally.
Warning.
It is that. Listen, all of you are kind of hitting on it, but now this is the fifth lesson. Even though it's the fifth lesson, I don't feel like you've really nailed this down. But I really want to move on this. Is as soon as you hear apocalypse or apocalyptic, you need to realize that it's not talking about, for us, it's not talking about the future. It's not talking about the end of time. And what you need to tell yourself is that apocalyptic literature, which is the book of Revelation, is a book of symbols that have meanings behind the symbols. And the reason that this literature is being used is it came to be the literature that the Jews used when they were suffering persecution. And God gives them a message through a prophet that says, I know you're suffering, and I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to deal with those who are persecuting you. They are going to be judged. What you're going through is not a judgment from me, and you ultimately will be blessed. The enemy's going to be judged. You're going to be blessed, even though you're suffering. That's the message of apocalyptic literature. And we've talked about this in the past 4 weeks, or 4 lessons, that there was a huge amount of apocalyptic literature that came out during the intertestamental period, or between the testaments, uninspired, but were designed to convey that message because they were under a lot of suffering from the Greeks and then the Romans. And so these uninspired apocalyptic pieces came out, like Enoch and Esdras and those many. There was probably 25 or 30 of them that came out to say the same thing. We're suffering, but that's not a judgment from God. And God is going to deal with those enemies who are persecuting us, and we ultimately are going to be blessed. We're going to inherit the earth and rule the whole creation. That's the message. And so they understood that it was not talking about the end of time. They understood that it was talking about their persecution that they were undergoing right at that time. So when we come to the book of Revelation, what I've been trying to show you is that that's the message of the book of Revelation as well. The reason that we have so many bizarre interpretations of the book of Revelation is because we're not Jews. The first century Jews this was not a mystery to them. They understood the book. And at that time, they were suffering persecution under the Roman Empire. And so the book was written to say, okay, you're not being judged by God because the Romans are killing you now, or getting ready to kill you and have started. I know what you're going through. I'm going to get them for this. I'm going to judge the Roman Empire for what they're doing to my children. And you're going to be blessed. And you're going to enter into glory. That's the message of the book of Revelation. And so when Jews, and for the book of Revelation, Jewish Christians who cling to the testimony of Jesus, when they read the book of Revelation, when it starts out the apocalypse of Jesus Christ, they understood right away this is talking about the persecution that's either started or getting ready to start against them. The message is God's going to judge the persecutor. The message is you're going to be blessed even though you're suffering now. They understood that right up front. Well, we read about galactic explosions and angels falling from the sky and all of this, and we go, that's got to be the future. Well, we're saying that because we're Gentiles. And as the early church began to become more Gentile, they had confusions about it as well. And so, premillennialism, which is the 1,000-year reign of Christ literally, and et cetera, or the rapture and all of that, that developed early in the church. But it didn't develop amongst the Jewish converts, it developed amongst the Gentiles. Any comments or questions about what I'm saying?
So exactly what does that last statement mean?
The what statement?
That last statement, exactly what does that mean? But you hear so much today, are you saying that that's not true?
That's not true. In fact, Becky and I I was watching a program this morning where this guy gets up and talks about, his whole lesson was on the rapture. Well, if he meant by the rapture the fact that Jesus is going to return and the church is going to be resurrected and caught up to be with him, yeah, I believe that, even though the word rapture does not appear in the Bible. But that's what they mean by rapture. If that's all they mean, then yeah, the Bible does teach that when Jesus returns, all of the believers are going to be resurrected, and the rest of us that are still alive, we're all going to be changed and caught up to be in the sky with Jesus for a while. I believe that because the Bible says that in a non-apocalyptic piece that we'll talk about later. But if what they go on to talk about Jesus coming and reigning for 1,000 years, and you've got all of these bizarre things, the Antichrist and all of that, no, the Bible doesn't teach that. Where they get that from are from apocalyptic books like Daniel, like Matthew 24, and the book of Revelation. Okay? And it's because they don't understand that this was written these were written to Jewish Christians or to a church. It was mixed, but to a church that had Jews in it, converted Jews, who was able to say, this is what this means. I don't believe there's anything in the book of Revelation that's about the end of time. Okay? And I think I can support that as we go through this course. Now, if it doesn't apply to the end of time and to us, why would I want to teach this book if it only applied to them? It doesn't only apply to them. The application, the truth is that God is very aware of the struggles we go through, and that people that persecute the church will be judged by God. Period. They're not going to get away with that. And even though we might be suffering, he'll see to it that we get through that and that we're glorified on the other side of it. That's the message that is eternal. That's the message that applied then, and it applies today. I don't know what's ahead of us. I mean, we're living in a pretty scary time. Putin and China have been kind of hinting at nuclear war. The first idiot that throws the first bomb is going to unleash a whirlwind. And we may go through a period of time where what you've seen in movies of post-nuclear war in America, and we're roaming about in the wilderness trying to scavenge for food, that's so bizarre, but it's so a possibility if nuclear war did break out. I can cling to the truths of the book of Revelation that God, I may be suffering, but God's going to see me through it, and on the other side, I'm going to be glorified with all his saints. And we're going to rule creation. And the enemies of the church will get theirs. God's not going to let that go unpunished.
Well, I think it's easy for people to see the book of Revelation in today's world because today's world is so far away from God and Christ, and you see the evil out there. It's easy to say, oh, the book of Revelation is happening right now. It's happening because they're so far away.
Right.
We are so far away. Not we as Christians, but there's so much.
Oh, the nation is doing things today that's approved by the leadership of our nation today that I never dreamed would be acceptable.
Right.
Never dreamed it.
Yeah, you never thought that you would see a Disney movie.
I didn't think I'd see it in my lifetime. So when you're asked, what is the book of Revelation about? What would you say?
Hope.
It's about hope. That's right. But when we say that, immediately people who don't understand it are going to go, well, that's talking about the end of time, hope. Well, the truths can be applied to that, but the book is not about that. The book itself is not talking about the end of time. And if you're unclear about that, look at the last 4 classes, because I've been really dealing with this, and I'm getting concerned that I can't seem to go ahead and get into the book. We keep talking about how to approach it and its interpretation. Okay. If we were in the first century church, and let's say we were Christians in the church of Ephesus, the city of Ephesus. We're all gathered together. John has got him a circuit going on where he goes to the 7 churches of Asia Minor and preaches. And today he's going to be here at Northwest, or here at Ephesus. And he walks in and he says, okay, I've got an apocalypse to give you. And it's about things that are getting ready to happen. It's shortly to take place. So get ready. What would you understand him to be saying just in those words?
Listen up.
Listen up. Why?
Because something important is going to happen.
It's getting ready to happen. Would you get the impression that he's talking about in 2,200 years from now? No. Well, let's look at a couple of verses. Look at Revelation chapter 1. Verse 1. The revelation or the apocalypse the apocalypse of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his bondservants the things which must shortly take place. Did he say that? Is that 2,200 years from then? This is in the first century that he says this. Is he talking about 2,200 years from then? And he sent and commanded and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy. Talking about this book. And heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near. The time is 2,200 years from now. No. You can't get that impression from what he just said, that the book is far distant future. And so he walks in, he tells us that, look, it's getting ready to happen. So listen, and he preaches us, he tells us about the vision that Jesus gave him, which is the book of Revelation. And he gets through after about 3 hours or 4 hours, and he's getting ready to walk out the room, and he says, okay, wait a minute, chapter 22. He's getting ready to walk out of the room. And he says in verse 6, and he said to me, these words are faithful and true, and the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, sent his angel to show his bondservant the things which must shortly take place.
Then how come they keep saying it's the end of time when they just don't know how to read? Is that why they keep saying it's the end of time?
Yeah.
You know, why do they keep? I don't understand.
Well, because like many things, the Bible was written by Jews to converted Jews. Jesus was a Jew. Everything Jesus said, he said as a Jewish prophet. And that's why it's so important for us to learn how to read the Bible from a first century Jewish perspective. That's very hard to do. You're not really equipped, most of you aren't equipped to do that. But there are tons of books that have studied out first century Jewish understanding, hermeneutic, how they interpreted the Bible. And that's why you used to pay me to get in there and search that out and dig that out so that I could try to give you the meaning of Jesus' words and the apostles' words from their perspective and not from ours. Okay. So this is not a Gentile Christian book. It's not a book of the Vatican. Okay. You know what I mean by that? A bunch of Latin religious folks that have evolved to today with very Gentile, non-Jewish concepts, which we inherited. We inherited that from the Presbyterians and the Methodists, the Catholics. You know, all the denominations are breakoffs from the Catholic Church. And they continue to teach that tradition. And the Church of Christ broke off from that and said, we're just going to try to teach what the Bible teaches and not teach different church doctrines. But still, we walked away, Alexander Campbell and those walked away, Thomas Campbell, walked away from the denomination. Still, their understanding was Gentile Christianity.
There are things, though, that are clearly confusing. Like in the passage you said, these things must soon take place in Revelation 22. And then the next words are, look, I am coming soon. Now, if that look, I'm coming soon refers to the second coming, that's not happening.
Right.
And yet it's adjacent to one that says these things must happen before, these are happening soon.
Yeah.
So I mean, in Matthew 24, he kind of does the same thing. Verse 34 says,
Yeah.
this generation will not pass away. And 39, he talks about being caught up in the air.
Right.
So the time lapse. as it's written
There's
is-
not a real time lapse because the struggle, what you're bringing up is the struggle I'm actually talking about.
Right. No, I know.
When we read of the coming, when Jesus says he's coming with his angels, we immediately go to the end of time when it was a typical apocalyptic expression that meant he's going to judge their current enemies. Did Jesus, when all right, the church is suffering under the Roman Empire, under the Jews. The Jews killed Jesus. So, and Jesus announced God's judgment upon Jerusalem for this.
Okay, but in Matthew, in verse 34, it says, this generation will certainly not pass away until these things are happened.
Right.
In 39, it says, this will be the son, somebody coming in the Son of Man, when we will be caught up in the air. I think you just said, that's also.
Not in that. Well, it doesn't say there that we're going to be caught up in the air.
This is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken, 1 will be left, 2 will be. Therefore, keep watch because you don't know when the day of the Lord will come.
Yeah. You're assuming that one being taken is one caught up in the air. And the text goes on, says that it's like in the days of Noah.
Right.
And they were in the fifth. Who was taken in the day of Noah? The good guys or the bad guys?
No.
The bad guys were. So the person being taken, and this was a Jewish expression from the Old Testament, that you're taken in judgment. And so we, with our Western mind, assume, because we've got in our thinking this rapture concept, that this is talking about the rapture, when it's not talking about the rapture. It's talking about judgment. Jesus makes that clear. It's talking about judgment. And to a Jewish mind, being taken in judgment wasn't being caught up in the air for salvation. It was being judged and dying and taken into captivity. So, and you just illustrated real well for me how confusing, if we don't understand the apocalyptic mindset of first century Jews, then it's so easy for us to take these passages and say, well, Jesus didn't come. His angels didn't come. But yes, he did. Because the Bible teaches clearly that when a judgment, when militaries act and they come upon other nations and so on, that there are spirit forces behind that. You remember the story of Elijah where they're in Dothan, the prophet's there, he's got his servant there, and the Syrians decide they're gonna kill Elisha, and the servant wakes up and he sees a city surrounded by the armies, and they've all got a placard. This is my thing, a placard that says, we're going to kill Elijah. And he says, hey, wake up, master, they're here, we're doomed. And he said, no, we're not. What? He says, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. The key point is with. It wasn't how big. Did the Syrian army outnumber?
186,000.
Yeah, they outnumbered them. And so Elisha prays and says, open his eyes. And he opens the servant's eyes and he sees the hills full of chariots of fire. Were they really there? Those chariots, I don't know if they actually had what we would call chariots, but God manifested what would make sense to his servant. These were spirit forces, spirit beings there to protect Elijah, which means there was a spirit force behind the Syrians. So they had a different concept of reality than we have. They understood that behind our reality There are spirit beings and there's spirit forces. And so Jesus promises that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed in Matthew 23. And he connects it with his coming.
His second coming?
No. His coming to destroy Jerusalem. Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. Turn back over to Matthew. We looked at this last week, but we really, I guess we need to thrash through this until it's understood. In chapter 23, Jesus pronounces woes upon the leadership of Israel in Jerusalem. And then he comes to you and he says that they're going to be destroyed. Verse 29, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Jesus says in verse 31, consequently you bear witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then, look at verse 32, fill up then the measure of guilt of your fathers. You serpents, you bunch of snakes. How shall you escape the sentence of hell? Therefore, behold, I am sending upon you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city. Who's going to send them? Jesus says, I'm sending. That upon you, verse 35, that upon you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. So, what's Jesus said so far? You're going to pay. You're going to pay. You bunch of murderers. You snakes. You're guilty. And I'm going to get you for it. Doesn't he say that? Not God's going to get you. I'm going to get you. Verse 36, truly I say to you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together the way a hen gathers her chicks, and you were unwilling. Now he goes on. Behold, your house, which was an expression referring to the temple in Jerusalem, is being left to you desolate. What do you understand that to be saying at this point? He is getting ready to judge Jerusalem. And he says, your temple, which you have all your trust in, is going to be desolated. For I say to you, from now on you shall not see me. And see, he's already referred to himself. Because he said, I'm going to bring this judgment on you. I'm going to send the prophets. And you're going to kill them. And I'm going to judge you for it. You will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Jesus came out from the temple. See, sometimes these chapter breaks are bad for us because it keeps us sometimes from realizing the context. Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. Why would they do that? Had they not been in the temple before? Yeah, many, many times. Jesus grew up around it. So did they. So why are they pointing to the temple buildings? Because what he just said about their house, the temple being desolated. And he answered and said to them, do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here shall be left upon another which will not be torn down. So he tells them real clearly. Desolation now means the total tearing down of the temple. And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be? What things? The tearing down of the temple. What will be the sign of your coming? Why would they say that? What coming? What coming has he talked about?
Destroy the temple.
Judgment on Jerusalem for killing the prophets and for rejecting him ultimately. And the end of the age. Why end of the age? Yeah, that goes back to the book of Daniel. Because Daniel's in Daniel chapter 9 and 10. Daniel is in Babylon. Why is he in Babylon? Because the temple has been destroyed. Solomon's temple's been destroyed. Israel's been taken into captivity. Jeremiah promised in 70 years you're going to be returned. The 70 years are completed. Daniel's praying and saying to God, God, 70 years are up. You know, bring, as you promised through Jeremiah, it's time, take us home. And God sends an angel and says, okay, there's going to be 70 times 7 years. And at the end of that 70 times 7 years, it's going to come to a complete end. Now that's significant because God had promised through Jeremiah that it would not, the tearing down of the temple, Solomon's temple, would not be a complete end, but it would be rebuilt. Now he says, the temple's going to be rebuilt, but then it's going to happen again and it's going to come to a complete end. That means the end of the Jewish age, as they knew it. Judaism didn't end with the destruction of the temple, but that aspect of Judaism it did. That covenant of Judaism ended. A new covenant came about with the Jews, and we're grafted into it. So,
When did sacrifices stop?
they stopped at 70 AD when the temple was destroyed. But then he comes on down and he says, he tells them what's going to be the sign of it. Verse 6, and you will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for these things must take place, but that is not the end. It's not yet the end. What end? The end of the Jewish economy, the end of the temple. Verse 13, but the one who endures to the end, what end? He's not talking about a new subject here. He's talking about the same thing that he started out discussing. The end of the temple, as he just said. The end of that economy. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for the witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. What end? Of that, yeah. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. And this goes back to Daniel. When Daniel said, there's going to be another destruction, and it's going to be the full end. So Jesus has started out talking about the destruction of the temple, comes and refers to Daniel, talking about the destruction of the temple in Daniel 5. And he says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let him who is on the housetop not go down to get the things out that are in his house. And let him who is in the field not turn back and get his cloak. Well, if this is talking about the end of time, what in the world difference does that make? Why not go get your cloak? Huh? You don't need any of that. It doesn't matter whether you go down, whether you flee to the mountain or not. So what? You flee to if it's end of time, it doesn't matter whether you flee to the mountain or not, but Jesus says, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Why? Well, it's the end of time. So, what difference is that going to make if you flee to the mountains? Because destruction is coming to Jerusalem. That's the topic that he's been talking about. And so when he comes to verse 29, but immediately after the tribulation of those days, what days? The attack of Jerusalem. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Is he suddenly talking about something different?
What about verse 14? Because that feels like end.
This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for the witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come.
So you're saying that end is destruction of Jerusalem, not...
Well, that's what the end has been since verse 3.
Right, but he's talking about the gospel of the kingdom, which is new. So the new covenant will be preached. At least the way I've always read that. It's not the old covenant. It's not the covenant with the Jews. So is he jumping back? Because that feels like that end feels like the end.
Except for the fact that Paul says that the gospel's been preached throughout the world. See, you know,
I'm not trying to be argumentative.
No, I welcome it because I think many in the room are going, okay, I don't know. But the thing is that when you enter into judgment stuff, lots of things are said, is this a word, hyperbolically? There's hyperboles.
Gross exaggeration.
Exaggerations. Did every person under the sun hear the gospel preached? No. But did all of the world, by the end of the first century, every nation have the gospel preached in it?
By 80, 70?
Yeah.
We have it on Facebook now where,
Yeah.
everybody can see it.
Yeah.
And
And Paul says, he makes the comment, I can't think of the passage, but he makes the comment.
I'm hearing from a lot of people that it feels like the end.
Yeah, and people were saying that during World War I. People were saying that during World War II. You know, this is the end of time. Yeah.
Okay, when they talk about all the world, are they talking about the Roman world?
Well, I don't know what they mean. You know, but the reality is, unless all of a sudden Jesus slips a gear and goes to the end of time as being the end, instead of talking about the end of Jerusalem, he does it. If he does it without warning.
Well, it clearly wouldn't have been preached in the East.
Right.
So that's
Well, maybe Thomas went to India, they say, and preached. Yeah.
Probably about the timeline when everybody went.
So,
When you're having your neighbors say, I'm ready to go home.
yeah,
I mean, I've had people tell me that.
Yeah.
I said I am too, and I've said that at my church. I've cried to be with my mom and dad. You know, I'm not trying to make a big deal or make a scene, or I'm there.
yeah. And I think many of us are.
Yeah.
So
why not be honest about it? Let's just
when he says, verse 15, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of through Daniel the prophet, what was that referring to in Daniel? It was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And when he says, verse 15, therefore, what does the therefore mean? I used to hear a little, when you see a therefore, look and see what is therefore. He's connecting what he's saying about what Daniel said with what he said in verse 14 and 13 and 12. The end that Daniel spoke of was the end of the age of the Jewish economy that was built on the first covenant. and was reliant upon the temple. And basically what Daniel was being told by the angel is that God's going to destroy the temple again, and it's not going to be rebuilt. That's the end of the age. That's the end of their economy. That's right.
Well, and to them, it's the end of their world until they see
Right.
that.
And so verse 29, we have all these apocalyptic expressions that come straight out of the prophets that were used to describe other destructions. And then he says, verse 30, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Did that happen?
Nope.
Not literally. It didn't happen literally, but it did happen spiritually. If Jesus and his angels were behind Rome, giving Rome power to destroy and judge Jerusalem, then Jesus is the power behind it. Okay? And then he says, verse 33, even so you too, when you see all these things, what things? Well, you can say, well, Jesus coming in the sky with his angels, recognize that he is near right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Are you getting this? These wild image destruction salvation pictures are not to be taken literally. They're pictures that have meanings behind them.
Bill, I've been listening to this Christian station, and they've been talking about how blessed are those who haven't seen the Lord. They are blessed so much more, but what about the ones that did see the Lord?
Yeah.
It's the ones that haven't seen, and they talk about how they haven't seen, and they believe that there's going to be a flood, and they believe all that, but we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, very strong faith there. Very strong.
Okay, folks.